Hey guys! Today I want to talk with you about The Flat Chair by Beth O'Leary. This romance novel has been released back in 2019 and it has been O'Leary's debut novel. As per usual, we will start this review with a short synopsis, and then proceed into a non-spoiler review and wrap this video up with the spoilers. If you haven't read this book yet, then do not worry, I will make sure to let you know when the spoilers begin. So The Flat Chair is about a 20-something-year-old girl named Tiffany, or how her friends like to call her, Tiffy. Tiffy is an assistant editor in a small publishing company in London which specializes in all kind of DIY books. And while Tiffy absolutely loves working there, the salary she gets for the job she's doing is not particularly high, which becomes somewhat of a problem when Tiffy's boyfriend Jason leaves her for another woman and not only asks her to move out from his place, but also to pay up the rent for the last few months she has been living in his apartment after the breakup. Long story short, now Tiffy is homeless, in debt, and without the funds to rent a proper living space. Here comes Leon, a 20-something-year-old nurse who only works nights and tends to spend his weekends at his girlfriend's place, and who is also in need of money. Leon is looking for someone to share his flat with. That someone who works during the days could have the flat all for themselves during the evenings, nights, and the weekends, while Leon would keep the apartment to himself during the day. Now, this arrangement is a little unconventional, as the apartment itself is rather small and has only one bedroom. But nothing could really go wrong with this situation, since Tiffy and Leon have their own strictly set up timelines, their own individual lives, and no intention of running into one another in the first place. Or so they thought. Alright, this time I will keep my non-spoiler review short and straight to the point, as there's quite a few things that I want to cover in my spoiler review. There are only two things that I need to point out that I didn't really like about this book, and first of them is how slow burn this book was. It really took a long time for the author to kickstart the action. It was my sister who recommended this book to me, as she found it to be cute and fun and entertaining, so I grabbed this book to read after a very long day as a way to relax, and I got bored. Page after page and chapter after chapter, the main story just didn't seem to want to start. I mean, it takes almost half of the book for the main characters to even meet for the first time. Yes, they do communicate before meeting up, and yes, the way they communicate is very sweet, but this novel is a definition of a slow burn romance. Another thing that I wasn't that big of a fan of is the writing style author chose when it comes to Leon chapters. The Flat Chair is written from both Tiffy's and Leon's POVs, and while Tiffy's chapters are written in a style that you would usually expect to see in a novel, Leon's chapters were written a little bit differently. So instead of getting something like this, we get something like this. And as I have talked a little bit before in my book review for Normal People by Sally Rooney, my dislike for this writing style choice is completely subjective. While it might have made it more difficult for me to read and for me to feel involved in the story, I do see how this is just a preference and how others might find this writing style enjoyable. That being said, The Flat Chair is an interesting and cute romance novel. Both of our main characters are lovely human beings, they have great chemistry, and the relationship between them feels natural as well. The book doesn't include any explicit scenes, therefore it can also be a good read for a young adult audience. While the overall love story between Tiffy and Leon is super sweet and heartwarming, what won me over in this novel and what made me want to talk about it was the fact that Beth O'Leary gave us something a little bit more meaningful than just your typical romance novel, where the romance aspect overpowers all and any other storylines. And I'm not saying that there is anything wrong with the romance novels that offers you just that, a romance, but I'm always happy to read a story that manages to combine the pink tinted glasses with a more meaningful message. And on that note, we will proceed to the spoiler review, so if you haven't read The Flat Chair yet, but you think it is something that you would like to do, then you should click off this video now. Overall, I think that what I liked the most about this book was how realistic the whole story felt to me. From the abusive ex-boyfriend to the developed trauma, to Leon's character quirks that have been influenced by his upbringing, to the life and work balance, to the reasonable end of Leon's and Kay's relationship, all the way to Tiffy's and Leon's love story in general. So let's take a few minutes to talk about some of these things in a little bit more of a detail. When we are first introduced to Jason, he seems more or less like a normal guy. Yes, definitely a douche who presumably cheated on Tiffy, practically kicked her out of the apartment, and demanded the money he felt that she owed him, but the story was vague enough to encourage me to not jump to the conclusions. After all, we only hear about the story of their breakup from Tiffy's point of view, and if I'm being completely honest, it is rather weird to keep on living with your ex-boyfriend months after your relationship ended. Even when we actually meet Jason for the first time on the cruise ship, we don't actually get to know anything about his character. Yes, there was this glance that he gave to Tiffy, which she instantly identified as his sex eyes, but I mean, we are reading this from the perspective of a girl who is heartbroken and at the same time is still hung up on her ex. It's not much of a reach to assume that maybe those sex eyes weren't really sex eyes, but something Tiffy wanted to see. Now as the story progressed and we got more appearances of Jason, as well as suddenly surfaced the memories from Tiffy, we can slowly, together with Tiffy, leave that bubble of Jason is not that bad of a guy and start to see him for who he really is. I feel like the author easing us into the full extent of Jason's manipulative behavior patterns and gaslighting tendencies was a wonderful idea, as it led us to better understand and sympathize with someone who has actually been emotionally abused. It made it easier to see Jason the way Tiffy sees him, to understand how she ended up in this position in the first place. Overall, I felt like the whole subplot of emotional abuse was handled nicely. More often than not, when I read romance novels that tend to be a little more complicated than just your regular sugar-sweet relationship drama, our main protagonists tend to be dealing with some sort of trauma, most common ones being physical or sexual abuse. I feel that The Flat-Chair must have been the first romance novel that I have read that actually dealt with emotional abuse, about what it's like being drawn into a toxic relationship, as well as what does it take to heal and break the same old patterns. I also enjoyed so very much that the emotional abuse wasn't introduced in this book just as some kind of a plot device that would give more depth to Tiffy and then forgotten as soon as she gets into a relationship with Leon. Instead, we got to see the slow process of Tiffy getting better, of her realizing what has been going on and seeking out professional help, as well as learning from her past and learning to follow her own gut and most importantly her own pace. At the same time, I love that the emotional abuse Tiffy experienced didn't become her whole personality. I do understand that in reality people react to trauma differently, but to me personally, the way Tiffy handled it felt realistic enough. She had good moments, she had bad ones too, but more often than not she stayed logical and open-minded. It's a stark difference to all those other ladies in romance novels that decide to never date a man again because one guy lies to them or cheats on them. And I'm looking at you, Much Ado About You. Tiffy is smart enough to realize that not every guy is like Jason and that she should try to work on not projecting her fear of past relationship onto her new one. As for Leon's upbringing, we can see that him growing up with this example of emotional trauma and his mom's inability of breaking the pattern affects him greatly to this day. He himself is not very open, not very emotionally available, and more often than not ready to step out of his comfort zone. He tends to create a bubble in which he feels safe and satisfied, and he desperately tries to stay in that bubble unless there's no any other choice but stepping out of it. Lastly, for me, the romantic relationships between the characters of the book felt very realistic. Leon and Kay broke up for very mundane and very common reasons. They just wanted different things from life and were no longer compatible. Instead of some huge breakup drama, we saw them simply choosing to end it and move their own individual ways. And when it comes to Leon and Tiffy, to be honest, usually I'm not a fan of the quirky girl stereotype. as well as I'm not usually a fan of a passive, indecisive male lead. Yet in this story, I felt like these two characters complemented each other perfectly. They built the foundation for the relationship by firstly communicating as friends without any expectations from one another. They got to know each other. They were very supportive of each other and appreciative of each other's oddities. Therefore, when they both finally met and realized that the physical attraction is also there and not just the connection on intellectual level, it was only a matter of time before they both decide to explore this further. I mean, it's very simple and very realistic. If you meet someone and you like them a lot, yet there's no chemistry, that's a great starting point for a friendship. And if you meet someone and you like them a lot, and you would also like to see them naked, then that's a perfect starting point for a relationship. Even when they have their obligatory fight before the final reconciliation, they don't really get into a fight. Leon, while being hurt, in the back of his head he still knows that he can't really blame Tiffy for going back to Jason, as breaking a pattern takes time. And Tiffy, while being hurt that Leon didn't trust her enough to believe that she would not hurt him in such a way, still wants to find a way to get in touch with Leon and explain him this misunderstanding, to have it all clear and out in the open. Of course, they both are behaving rather irrationally at the moment, especially Leon, as they both are hurt and prideful, but when a push comes to shove, they do not let the pride to ruin what they have, which is a great relationship based on friendship, unconditional support, and understanding. There's one more thing that I'd like to mention before we wrap up this review, and that's the side characters of this book. Richie was my absolute favorite character, if I'm being completely honest. Tiffy and Leon could move aside and the author could just give me a full-on book following Richie's life, and I would be more than happy to read it. He is such a positive person. Even while stuck in a situation like his, he's still trying to be there for his brother, and he manages to bond with Tiffy during their very first phone call. Overall, every time he showed up in the book, instead of the shadow of the heavy drama due to him being falsely imprisoned, I just felt happier and more relaxed. Richie seemed like a guy you just want to have around. Unfortunately, I can't say the same about other characters in this book. Tiffy's friends felt rather one-dimensional and were not very well developed. Yes, the author made it clear for us what these characters meant to Tiffy, but we didn't actually got a chance to learn anything about them as individuals. They felt a little too stereotypical. Rachel is a single party girl, Gertie is a badass lawyer who is very mean but has a heart of gold, and Mo is the sweet teddy bear who is always there when you need an advice. To be honest, I so much didn't care about these characters that I was completely indifferent to learn that Gertie and Mo got together. I just didn't know enough about these two people as individuals or about their dynamic together to care about whether they're dating or not. Same goes to the people in Leon's life, and by the people, I mean Patience. I guess they were introduced to us to flesh out Leon's character a bit better or to make his work life more authentic, but for me, it just felt like you could remove these characters and nothing much plot-wise would change. Overall, I felt like this book was a great mix between the lighthearted love story and the heaviness that comes from important and serious topics, such as healing from trauma. It was easy to read, interesting to read, and most importantly, it actually left me with something to think about. But that's just my opinion. What about yours?